So the Tories are massacring jobs. That's the slogan on the Communist Party morning scar of Monday, the 14th of September. And then today it's leading on another kind of shallow victory. This is the deportation flight hit turbulence. That is the bragging headline on the Communist morning scar. It says, court halts deportation and blow to Home Secretary. It's rubbish. This is not a blow to the Home Secretary at all. It's overstated and completely ignorant piece of bragging by the stupid morning scar. It lulls the 10 or 12 readers that are there in all of England into thinking that victory is near against the fascists and against the racists and against the criminals, against the lawbreakers. And this is the morning scar that hyped up Corbyn and was colluding in the operation of a number of accounts, Twitter and Facebook, whatever, saying that Corbyn or JC for PM. Now that was stupid at various levels because the UK quote system is not presidential and the Prime Minister is not elected by the general franchise. The Prime Minister, whoever, is appointed by the monarch based on the majority, either real or artificial, contrived in the House of Commons, majority of the MPs. And that happens after. That's the point. Well after any election, because the election is for electing constituency members. And it is the constituency members who then express a kind of preference for a leader of the House of Commons, whoever has the majority in the House of Commons. If there isn't a majority in the House of Commons, then there is a coalition, as happened in May 2010, with a deadly, lethal, destructive kind of destructive role played by the Sikh Clegg, who is now doing the Sikh making stuff for Mark Zuckerberg. So he colluded with Cameron, who brought about Brexit. So all of those things were missed by the Communist Party morning scar. And to this day, the morning scar has not accounted for its stupidity over those years. So it says that Priti Patel has been dealt a blow by the court. That is absolute rubbish. The court system is a corrupt system colluding with the main kind of elements that control the power in this country. So the so-called separation of powers is a myth, and a lethal myth because it leaves millions of people exposed to injustice on a daily basis. And millions of other people are barred forever, for life, from access to so-called justice. There is no fair access to the court system. It is a corrupt system reserved for the crooks with the money, no matter where the money comes from. That's the only guaranteed access that is available in the court system. So this is a corrupt, stupid, ignorant piece by the morning scar. That's This is a piece that justifies my calling it morning scar. Scar meaning it distorts basic facts and distorts the context and distorts the truth. It says Priti Patel bid to deport 1,000 channel crossing asylum seekers by the end of the year hit another wall yesterday after a judge halted a charter flight to Spain. That is absolutely misleading on all counts. If a charter flight, even if a charter flight was halted, it doesn't amount to her failing in her bid to deport 1,000 channel crossing asylum seekers, because she can come back and she can apply again. And so this is the abysmal depth of stupidity and ignorance about the so-called court system and the options that are available, always available to the executive to find ways around this temporary insignificant glitch. And they come round and they will get their way and they will deport people and they will consign them in concentration camp like deportation centers. And the communist morning scar has nothing to do with reporting any of those things that are going on every day of every week. And this woman called Celia Clark, who is described here as the immigration detainees director, saying that Patel's pledge to deport 1,000 channel crossing asylum seekers as alarming, and added that removals are often in breach of the law. Often. They're always in breach of the law. Often and always are two different things. And this illustrates the point that the likes of these so-called charitable organizations, these are part and parcel of the kind of de facto aiders and abettors brigade, aiding and abetting the corrupt and the racist and the oppressive state that Priti Patel represents. And Priti Patel is saying, even after the so-called ruling, this case has not abated our determination, and we have more flights planned in the coming weeks and months, exactly as I've said before I read that particular quote. So the Morning Star's headline is absolute rubbish. It's not the truth. So why is the Morning Star celebrating the stupid incident instead of saying that Priti Patel, the daughter of asylum seekers who were ousted from East Africa, is now assaulting all rights of the current asylum seekers. That's what the headline should be, based on the contents, not based on my opinion, but based on the contents in the copy. And so therefore the Morning Star is completely wrong, and it was wrong in peddling the lie that Jeremy Corbyn was destined to become the prime minister. We said exclusively, we said in our posts that that was stupid on every level, and it was unrealizable because they were focusing on Corbyn getting to be prime minister. That is wrong, because the aim should have been to advocate a manifesto that addressed the needs of the absolute majority of this country's people and abided by the law and showed the world that Britain was complying with the legal obligations arising from its signatory status as a signatory to all the international charters, declarations, agreements, conventions, and yet they kept on talking about Corbyn for PM. Every time Corbyn appeared against a Tory prime minister, whoever it was, whichever it was, and I think Corbyn faced three of them, Cameron, May, and Johnson. Every single appearance was a wasted opportunity. And that showed that those who were egging Corbyn on from behind, from the sidelines or whatever, were as stupid as Corbyn was, intellectually deficient. And Corbyn was ignorant about what is called the current affairs, the actual headlines that were being dominant on the day. So Corbyn was not fit for the kind of spot to confront the Conservatives, either from number 10 Downing Street or from the opposition. So what gave the communists, the so-called communists, they are not communists really, the Communist Party, CPGB, and the Morning Star, any basis to support the idea that Corbyn was to be promoted as the prime minister at the election, and whoever else promoted that line. These people lack substance as much as Corbyn does. And that is contrasted in the most recent episode, lasted 2 minutes, the main episode, where Ed Miliband staged that particular exhibition of what can be done or could be done, putting Boris Johnson in his place as the incompetent, ignorant, lazy, and mentally retarded in terms of political contents occupant in that post. Corbyn did not do that once. And he had 5 calendar years, if you like, to find the spot, the weak spot for the Conservatives, and there were plenty of weak spots all throughout. So the Morning Star is not the world's leading, the only English language left-wing daily. It's rubbish. These are headlines. So it says these trigger-happy Tories get £22,000 for shooting days. So what? The Morning Star doesn't actually campaign. And by that I mean that Morning Star doesn't contain copy about campaigns that people are doing in every kind of part of the country. And because they don't report those, the assumption is perpetuated that there is no campaign. There is outrage, there is dissatisfaction, there is betrayal, and there is life-threatening violations of rights by the local councils and by other agencies of the state. Morning Star doesn't carry those reports. And this is another lazy, stupid plea to the Tory. Of course they deserve better. Of course they deserve better, but they don't get that by being reported in this stupid, infantile way. Obvious slogan. And then again, there is a victory again, which is wrong. because that completely ignores the plight of the people who are victims of the care home negligence. What do they do with the extra money? The care home staff or care workers. Who are they accountable to? And who held them to account for the thousands of people who died in care homes in the last few months? So the Morning Star is not asking the question, never. Nor did Jeremy Corbyn, nor did any of the other left outfits. And that is where the deficiency is. It's deadly deficiency. And when Keir Starmer returned this week to appear against or opposite Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer literally looked stiff, absolutely stiff. That is immobile, that is not dynamic, that is not awake. So none of this is reported, let alone analyzed, in the Fleet Street titles that I'm about to start diagnosing for today. This is Friday, the 18th of September 2020. That's the bag full of the newspapers. How many are there? The ones in Fleet Street, from Fleet Street, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 10 from Fleet Street. And that is leaving out the so-called morning version, which is the Metro, and the so-called evening version, which is the evening, no standard. And the first one I have got in front of me is The Guardian. And there is a piece by somebody called Alicia Keys, who is shown with a quotation on the front page. I've met plenty of billionaires and they are miserable. And there is a plug for Kate Winslet, who is having a season of plugs. And the test and trace barely functional as 10 million people now face lockdown. And there is a piece which is called Exclusive, byline to Lucy Osborne, which says that a woman called Amy Doris from Florida alleges that Donald Trump forced his tongue in her mouth and groped her in 1997. So that's the front page of the Guardian, which is dominated image-wise by this new victim of Donald Trump's sex assault. And we shall be talking about the rest of the Guardian in a short while. And they're giving this particular allegation more space on page 2 than to anything else. And they've got, of course, a piece on the carping Rees-Mogg. And the political sketch writer John Crace, his headline is Typhoid Dido leaves MPs none the wiser about testing, tracing, and why she is in charge. So we've got the Guardian there, we'll be coming to that. And then the Mirror is repeating the same substance, about 10 million being left in that state. And the Times is forced to run this headline. It's not pleased to be running this headline, but that's what the evidence forces it to do that. Even the Murdoch scum is acknowledging the 10 million in less attractive, less visible way, but that is what it is saying, the 10 million. And the Express is back on the insanity mode, raising the status of achievement of Boris Johnson to the highest kind of height. It is celebrating test result in just 90 minutes. It doesn't say anything about what happened to the no test 10 million. And there is this rivalry between the wife of Michael Gove and the wife of the ex-Tory MP. And the Daily Star is continuing its kind of jokey headline. And the Boris Graf is admitting that the hospitals have been told to clear beds for COVID spike in 2 weeks. And the EU's front person, von der Leyen, has convinced Brussels can still reach the trade deal with the UK, despite the panic and despite the hateful headlines in the Brexiteering papers in this country. And there is this new illegal bid to impose vaccine in the UK. So what is happening with the papers today is that there is no recognition. There is no recognition of the underlying truth, which is that the UK government, which has been in Tory hands for the last 10 years, is unfit to deliver the necessary protection and service to the public. That is what is actually the underlying truth. And no newspaper, none of these is asking this question, none of these actually answering this question, and none of these actually providing the investigative evidence about what has been going wrong, like A to Z. What are the sequences of the failure? Where did they begin? And as I have been saying, this is because the culture of accountability that should be here is not here. And without accountability, there cannot be the truth, because the first thing accountability does is to look for the truth, objective accountability. And the truth is that whatever the Morning Star is saying about the £22,000 being grabbed by the Tories for shooting and murdering animals, the truth is that billions of pounds are grabbed under the excuse of the FALA scheme, which is coming to an end for most of the people in most need. So the operation of the robbery has been continuing even at an exacerbated rate, at an accelerated rate, under the covers of the emergency kind of treatment or actions to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. So the people who have are being enriched under the cover. And all the projects and all the grants and all the kind of contracts that have been given to friends, acquaintances, and members of the families of the Tories and the cons are being allowed to take place without Keir Starmer representing anything like a protest. And the newspapers are failing. The newspapers are failing to emphasize that and highlight that and to link that with the lack of preparedness and lack of readiness of the country to deal with the emergency. And that extends to the crisis that has actually bedeviled, imperiled the idea of the National Health Service from the beginning for 70 plus years. Because there has never been treatment fair and due and attentive and competent and just delivery of service to all who have needed and justifiably needed treatment, remedies, care under the umbrella of the National Health Service in the 70 years. There has been and there continues to be huge denials of service, regardless of the pandemic. And that's the point I'm making. The reason why there has not been the necessary preparation is because there has been a culture of denial and denying the rights, the needs, and entitlements, and the claims to be given the due and necessary and urgent and emergency care, attention, and respect. The way that the care home residents were victimized is going to be, because they can't admit it even now, but it is going to be kind of referred to by the very perpetrators and some of the propagandists and peddlers as one of the biggest scandals and crimes committed by the state and its agencies against the people that it's supposed to be there to protect and shield and defend from attacks from all kinds, including attacks from deadly disease and deadly negligence, deadly lack of care. And they're saying here that the vaccine will be, but there is no vaccine, there is no guarantee, and there is no safe kind of vaccine. It's not my opinion, it's that they can't say that the vaccine is safe because it is new. So the answer is not vaccine, is not breaking the law, is not breaking the law and imposing restrictions, undue restrictions on people's due liberties. The answer is preparation and care. Now, think about that. If there is preparation, high standard of preparation, highly resourced actual provisions, and care and accountability by those who provide and will actually attend to those in need, then the extent of the infection and the effect of it will be very massively reduced. It is logical and it is the fact in every rational kind of assessment of cause and effect. If the people who are in need of care are cared for properly, then of course they benefit from that extent of the care. And if they're not cared for, they lose. It's logical. And there is no culture of accountability, and there is always passing the buck as a general rule everywhere, on everything. Today's newspapers are full of passing the buck because nobody is responsible. despite the fact that they have got the headlines, for example, in the Boris graph, which is admitting that hospitals told to clear beds for COVID spike in 2 weeks. So they're saying that hospitals and councils have been told to find extra beds for coronavirus patients within 2 weeks as the NHS braces for a second spike in cases. With a steep rise in infections, isolation units are being set up where COVID patients can recover, with ward space freed up for those who need more care. More than 10 million people will soon be living in local lockdown areas after the Northeast became the latest region to impose curfews. Now, what happens when they say that hospitals told to clear beds? What happens to those suffering from other illnesses, long-term illnesses, serious illnesses? What happens to those? Now that is something that is, of course, used by the apologists for Boris Johnson, who have been using that apology as an excuse for Boris Johnson's failure. But essentially, those seriously ill and seriously in need of care and treatment and attention and support are there, and the numbers are many times more than the numbers of the people who are infected with COVID-19. What happens to those? And that is where the answer of accountability, the answer to the question of why there isn't the remedies, and that is to do with the lack of accountability throughout the year. And even in the last few months, when they have been reporting kind of decreasing spread or incidence of the infection rate, they have been silent about the lack of accountability throughout. And there is no excuse for the providers of care and treatment to say that there is one particular week or month, or let alone longer, in which they can relax and they can say that, well, we can take a sit back and back seat and we don't have to pay attention. Treatment of the seriously ill and the otherwise in need of care, this is a 24-hour emergency requirement. And the NHS providers have not treated this as a 24-hour emergency affair. The NHS bureaucrats, careerists, managers, consultants have for the last 70 years, in varying degrees, treated the NHS and the health duties to look after the health of the people that need the care and the treatment as a kind of market, as a kind of field to exploit and to kind of abuse and misappropriate. Any observation of any NHS hospital in this country would show that. You go into a hospital environment and there is no way to tell who is delivering what and who is accountable, who is answerable. There is a passing of the buck and you are pushed along the line and you go from one to the other and on to the other and you look at them in amazement as to what they're going to say. You are not treated, even if you are going there to inquire about somebody who is in the hospital, you are not treated as being altogether fit to be spoken to. You are treated as if you are lacking in something by going there and asking them questions. And they are in place to provide you with the answers, competent, truthful, timely, and relevant, and life-protecting answers. And they don't, most of the times. So it's like a place in darkness. That is the experience most of the people have about going to hospital. So it's nothing to do with the actual medication, the medicine, the treatment, the diagnosis, the actual diagnosis, if there is a correct diagnosis. Because there is no accountability. So therefore it's all over the place. And that has been going on for decades. So this is not just happening this week. This has been going on for decades. And the imposition of the Brexit stranglehold on the consciousness of the nation is a deliberate imposition by Boris Johnson as a diversion, as a very substantial diversion away from the failures and the negligence and the calamity that he is fronting. And they are talking about John Lewis, the department store, sacking staff bonus or axing staff bonus for the first time in 70 years after profits plunge. So that's a sign of the times coming. It's not the whole story. It is going to get even worse because of the lack of accountability by this government and lack of honesty by Rishi Sunak, who is now going to make the poor even poorer. He has already rewarded the rich with billions of pounds under various excuses, as was illustrated by the accidental leak about the theft of money by Philip Green. Green is a billionaire crook, and other crooks that have not been named have been actually profiting from the cover of COVID-19 and furlough, and they have been making the main gain. And there is this thing about the joking. And they're saying that Johnson is asking Cummings, where exactly did it start going to go wrong? So it's not accountability. It's not telling the truth. They should be running the front page saying that we must stop stealing and robbing the country, stealing from and robbing the people. And I've got this two-page spread about testing, and they're not identifying. They're giving the headlines, the numbers going kind of to rise and so forth, and has been rising, but they don't say, as I said, A to Z. There is no trail of accountability. There is no trail of responsibility. That is wrong with the kind of papers, because they're competing with one another for headlines, catchy headlines. They're not competing with one another to tell the truth to the readers of the country. And they've got a fun game, blankety blank, on page 6 about this disaster. It's a fun game. It's not taken seriously. And there is nothing about accountability anywhere in the Star. So the Daily Mail is peddling Jeremy Hunt Somebody was saying yesterday that Boris Johnson was having too many lightweights in his cabinet. So he should bring in Jeremy Hunt. And so part of that agenda to bring back Jeremy Hunt is being peddled in the Daily Mail on the front page, saying that Jeremy Hunt exposes damning toll of lawsuits against the NHS. But it doesn't say what I have been saying, that the NHS has been hijacked by gangs of consultants and big business operatives and agents who have stopped the NHS forever being accountable and responsible to the people that have needed NHS care and attention at the point of need. And they're saying that 1 billion cost of maternity blunders. Now, blunders is lack of accountability. Lack of accountability is not blunders, it's lack of accountability. Two different things. Blunders is an excuse word. Lack of accountability is holding somebody responsible, at least in principle. So blunders and shambles are irresponsible, unaccountable words and phrases. And they are repeating the same thing as the Daily Express has got on its front page, which is saying the 90-minute COVID test, that's 94% accurate. And they're talking about Thailand's off the quarantine list. And Jeremy Hunt is given the space on page 4 to have this article. How can we spend more on maternity blunders than we pay doctors and nurses on maternity wards? So he is actually denying the claims of the people who have suffered in the maternity wards. He's saying that that's okay to deny them the care and the standard of treatment that they deserve. So there is the clue. These people are hoodwinking the gullibles. This headline is designed to mislead and to create an emotional antipathy towards those victims in the maternity wards. And this is typical. The maternity wards failures are representative of the overall failures in the system. And he is now saying the doctors and nurses, doctors and nurses are not beyond accountability. That is where the failure starts. They're not exempt from accountability. When they're talking about and dealing with life and death decision making, then they have to be accountable, absolutely accountable, and there has to be the highest possible accountability standard. Hunt is not talking about that at all. It is an emotional blackmailing thing. And there is this kind of 2-page thing on the Daily Mail about this ex-MP's wife that is completely typical sub-pornographic coverage by the Daily Mail. That is their particular kind of niche area, providing sub-pornography. Now, on page 8 of the Daily Mail, it says, question, how many illegal migrants in the UK? Answer, no idea, admit officials. Now, this is the kind of depiction of illegal and migrants together that is in breach of law, breach of UK law and international law. They're presenting the concept of migrants as automatically automatically a wrong thing. Migrant is a bad concept. Migrant is bad for Britain. They're leaving out the causes of the need to migrate include Britain and will continue to include Britain. And the causes have been British decision makers, British trade deals, British empire, British colonialist control of the resources of the countries from where these people are escaping. And then there is this soft headline. It is admitting the truth, but only part of the truth. It's not blaming. It's not holding to account the conservatives whose agenda is to destroy the idea of National Health Service. And that is what this is doing. This is discrediting the idea of the National Health Service as well as betraying and letting down the people who are most affected. The series of failures is also exposing the NHS to the accusation from the anti-NHS idea lobbyists and traders and propagandists who say that the nationalized provision of health care and health service is not practical and is not good for society, not good for the economy, and not good for the individuals in need of care and treatment. But they are admitting this one, at least. They're admitting this one, but she is only a consequence. If she is a Baroness Clueless, then she is clueless because she was not fit to be appointed, and yet she was appointed by Johnson. So actually it should be Boris Johnson the Clueless, not just Dido Harding the Clueless. And they're having a go at her. But she was created by Cameron, created Baroness by Cameron, who was a contemporary of her at the overrated Oxford, and the corrupt kind of connections between these people. So whatever reservations they have against one another, like Johnson and Cameron, they shield one another. So Johnson rewarded her additionally by scrapping the body and then foisting Dido Harding in the place of the body that he scrapped. And there are two opportunities on the page 16 of the Daily Mail. One is the absolutely vile Chris Grayling, the Brexiteering devil, Chris Grayling, who is getting £100,000 for 7 hours a week of ports advice. Now, this man is the most unfit person to advise anyone about any port because of his record that he awarded when he was Secretary of State at the expense of the transport needs of the country. He awarded contracts to a non-existent shipping company or a company that had no ship, and he awarded contract on shipping to that company. That is how totally, absolutely non-existent this state and its accountability is on the standard of, basic standard of accountability. Such a criminal was allowed to remain a cabinet minister long after he was exposed as doing that kind of fantasy thing, while he supported the forcing of the poor to commit suicide. He supported the people in most need of help to be sanctioned and deprived of the DWP money, so that thousands committed suicide in desperation. And this man is getting 100,000 pounds for 7 hours a week of ports advice. How could he be allowed to do that? And where is the justice? Where is the accountability? There is none. Now, on to Tom Watson. Now, when Tom Watson began to kind of stand next to Jeremy Corbyn immediately after Corbyn was kind of declared the winner in the leadership, and Watson was he was visually kind of blocking the camera from looking at Corbyn or picturing or photographing or filming Corbyn. It became quite clear in the early footages. For months, if not for the first 18 months, it's 1 year and a half, he blocked the media camera from having a good look and view of Jeremy Corbyn, the then newly elected leader of the Labour Party. So the Khoodeelaar campaign posted a series of exclusive observations about that and said that Tom Watson was not a symbol of honesty or accountability or democracy, whatever. That Tom Watson was abusing his position as he was up to something. Obviously, long after that, Tom Watson was exposed as being part of the engineers of the internal plot against Jeremy Corbyn. But we said that without any access to any of that information about what was going on internally. We correctly observed that he was behaving in a way that was inconsistent with general kind of courtesy and administrative kind of efficiency, and that must have been the product of him operating something else. And every detail that has emerged since we said that about what Watson was doing confirms what we said. And he is now being reported. Now, as a campaigner against gambling, how can this person even think of taking money from the gambling criminals? That's what he's doing. So not only is there no accountability generally, even when there is somebody like that, Tom Watson, who made a big deal out of campaigning against gambling, openly taking the money from the gambling industry, there is open contempt for any morality, any moral integrity. And the Daily Mail is saying that the government should not impose another lockdown. And the Crown Prosecution Service is warning that faking of video evidence will be a risk to justice. Now, that is a double kind of assumption that there is a justice already without the faking of the evidence. There isn't. There should be, but there isn't. But the fact that there is even a notional acknowledgement of the need for justice is just that small, tiny, but important kind of evidence that there is some recognition of the need for justice. And only on page 26, is the Daily Mail reporting about the EU chief saying that we can do a Brexit deal. And they've got an attack on Joe Biden, who had warned that the UK's breaking of the agreement with the EU would threaten the Good Friday Agreement. And the Daily Mail is now running on pages 30 and 31, a two-page spread by Tom Leonard about the new civil war tearing America apart. And that's the kind of thing that again hides the truth about racism and Trump and diverts attention and blames the anti-Trump and anti-fascists and anti-racists equally as it blames the racists and the fascists and the Trump brigade. And the rest of the Daily Mail is typical kind of trashy bits. And Stephen Bush, the new kind of board of deputies person, is given a column in the I newspaper about the lockdown being incurred accidentally. There is nothing of substance except that this is repeating the attack on Joe Biden about the Good Friday Agreement. And there is no evidence of the unfitness of the local councils, of hospitals, of the personnel involved in making the decisions about the care homes and other vital aspects of the failures of the preparation and the preparedness. They're giving the numbers, but they're not explaining the actual facts. And the diagnosis of Fleet Street is very much based on this absence of evidence and absence of investigation. The daily Boris graph, which is admitting the hospitals told to clear beds for COVID spike in 2 weeks, the daily Boris graph is not blaming Boris Johnson, and it's not blaming Rishi Sunak, the finance minister, for letting down millions of people who are going to be plunged back into low income and poverty. And they're running a story about the campaigners against fur trade that will kill off bear skin hats. That is their concern, not about the cruelty to the animals that are being murdered for the furs, but the bear skin hats. So that's the corrupt agenda of the so-called heavyweight quality so-called newspaper, the Daily Boris graph. And they're running this piece about Dominic Raab telling Joe Biden that any failures by the UK to abide by the rule of law and the Good Friday is the EU's fault, not Britain's. And they're running a piece on page 9, which is absolutely untrue, saying that the BBC defends comics joke about killing white people. The BBC is not doing any such thing, but that actually has a racist kind of audience believing the Daily Telegraph's lies. And Arl Spencer is saying that history has been reduced to now only Hitler and Henry VIII. Which is not the real story, but we shall read this to see what exactly he is saying and why the Telegraph is reporting this in this headline. Arl Spencer says history lessons have spiraled down in schools, with teachers now serving up only Henry VIII and Hitler. The younger brother of Diana, Princess of Wales, believes history has become a minor discipline and that a wider breadth needs to be taught. Well, this is a history kind of lesson because the younger brother of Diana is author of a number of history books, and he has got an interest in promoting history as he sees it that fit his kind of coverage. Now, there is a mystery over 50 billion lost to shadow economy. Little known about the whereabouts of a huge number of banknotes in circulation. As much as 50 billion worth of banknotes could have disappeared into the shadow economy. The spending watchdog has found the number of notes in circulation hit a record high of 4.4 billion in 2020, but it is estimated that less than a third are regularly being used for cash transactions, according to a report by the National Audit Office. The National Audit Office said little is known about the remainder, thought to be worth approximately 50 billion, but suggested that it could be held overseas in undeclared household saving note pots or have been swallowed up into the shadow economy. This is generally considered to include income from illicit services such as drug dealing, prostitution, or undeclared work to avoid paying tax. The National Audit Office said that government bodies have little reliable information to quantify how much is likely to be held where. Now, that is another evidence of lack of accountability. As much as a third of the notes in circulation or the money is unaccounted for and cannot be traced properly. That is proof of the assertion, the diagnostic finding by this program, by this campaign, that there is no accountability, there is no culture of accountability in this country. And so we shall be continuing this theme on the evidence, and we shall be ending this one at 21 past 9 GMT in the morning of Friday, the 18th of September 2020.